All right, another day. Derek, you're a little low for some reason, I think. Let me see. Just there we go. Now we see that beautiful face. All right, now you're
That
looking
that full
sharp.
that full form that full form figure.
That's it. You're looking sharp now. We have a great guest on today. Coach Hoover is really an innovator in the sports performance space, and I know Derek connected with him, and as we're going through, we've had on some great innovators, like Tony Holler in the feed the cat space, and Mark here is right in line with this, really taking sports performance to the next level. Speed, I used to call speed, strength, and conditioning, but I don't like to even call it that in that aspect anymore because I really think of it as performance and explosion and really trying to get your speed, because speed and strength and power and explosion are the keys to really having great sports performance and improving that athleticism. So kind of moving away from even me, and I know Derek is too. We're starting to move away from kind of that word sports conditioning, strength and conditioning, because that doesn't necessarily apply unless we're going to go out and all run miles and be milers. And even them, it's being an athlete's an important thing. So we're really excited to have you on, Coach, to talk about it. And I want you to kind of go a little bit into your background, because this space is really exploding. And when I first got into it myself, I had owned three sports performance facilities in the 2000s through 2011, and we were kind of in the forefront of all that with, back in the day with Bill Parisi and all those kind of groups. And it's evolved a lot since then. And there's a lot of things that are really kind of going into it, most specifically how the nervous system is affected by the things we're doing, and really trying to help performance from that standpoint. So without further ado, go into your background and then we'll dive right into it all.
All right. I really appreciate you guys asking to be on. Um, Derek, the New Jersey coaches at the Wing T Clinic, I mentioned you, and Coach Gary, he had a lot of good things to say, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, Coach Gallagher's a great guy,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
He is the disciple, dude. He's been on this numerous times.
Well, that's what he said.
He's a legend.
Yeah, I go back with those guys. Believe it or not, almost 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started off as a football coach. I came. I think that's one of the reasons it kind of spun into what it's become for me, is that I did not come from your traditional strength conditioning, sports performance background. I came from the era of I get out of college and I jump on at a high school, and the head coach says to me, "You are the biggest dude on the staff, so you're going to be our weightlifting guy." So that's
Yeah.
that's where it came from, and that's still a thing. That's still a thing, believe it or not. It's starting to dissipate a little bit, but that's kind of still a thing in a lot of places, just mostly out of necessity than anything else. But yeah, I came in from that. I originally was a history teacher and just your typical meathead football coach. I tell people a lot that there was a time when I had no interest in being out on the field when we were doing our performance, quote unquote, training. I just wanted to be in the weight room with the guys, and that's because of your perspective. You're going to learn to believe, what the lens you look at the world through. And I was never. I played small college football, but I was, not very good. I was kind of a backup player and played a little bit here and there. And the only time that, and I've said this a lot now, it took me a while to be able to admit this, but now it doesn't matter. I'm 30 years away from it. But I tell people that I was always the star when we were doing that 1 rep max testing, man, that's when I was the coach's favorite, because, I don't think I was ever at any point in high school or college, that, except maybe very young in high school, that I wasn't in the top 3 on that record board in those strength lifts, but I just couldn't move, and you get to a point where, you have to be able to play football, like
Right.
no matter how much you can bench and squat,
Yep.
So that was kind of my perspective, is that, I bought into that whole, the more you squat, the faster you run type, thought process that permeated the scene. And when I came in the mid 90s, so it wasn't, and it's still out there a little bit, but it's starting to fade. It's starting to fade away a little bit. But anyway, that's kind of how I came into it. And, I was a head football coach for 11 years. There was even a time when I wasn't running my own weight room as a head football coach, where, because I was in the history classroom, and, we were doing things in the summer that I was involved in. And then, I guess it's been 15, 16 years, maybe 17 years now. I was coaching assistant coach at a big school in North Carolina, and a good buddy of mine was the head coach, and I was doing our strength stuff. And, I think I was doing probably a decent job. And I really thought that I knew how to make kids strong, so I knew I was a good strength conditioning coach or whatnot, And then he said, "Hey, you do a great job, but I want you to go and visit one of our players' dads, who is the head of strength conditioning for the football program at Wake Forest University, Ethan Reeve." So I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go over there." And, so I walk in there after, I'd been coaching by that point 12, 14 years, something like that. And just kind of, I had gotten a little better over the time, obviously, but I still was pretty limited in my knowledge looking back. And when I walked in, I tell people this every time I talk about my background, is the day I walked into the weight room at Wake Forest that time for the first time was the last time I was pretty sure I knew exactly what I was doing.
Mhm.
Because when I walked in there, and you kind of know that, and this is how I kind of judge people when I talk to them, is about, where they're probably going as a coach, is do they act, sorry, I got somebody ringing the doorbell here.
You're good.
They act like they know everything, or are they searching? Because that was a watershed moment in my point that I see a lot. And that's the biggest mistake. And I've seen it recently. Young guys come out of college. They're good athletes. They're great athletes, maybe a Division I athlete. So they think because of their athletic accomplishments that somehow they're an expert in human performance or athletic performance development. Nothing could be further from the truth, because, that's really what I thought too. And then I walk into Ethan's room, and immediately I realized I needed to know more. And then once you start getting the answer to the next question, it leads to more questions and more questions and more questions. And now I heard Mike Boyle say this once, and I steal this from him all the time. Obviously, what you're doing at the moment, you believe is the best way to do things, but that doesn't mean it necessarily is. There might be a more optimal way, a better way, so you should always be searching for that. And that's not to say that every time you hear a coach talk, you're like, "Oh, my philosophy changes." No, it's building blocks. You have, like, when I walked into the Wake Forest weight room, I had a solid one level Lego house built, like I understood that I could make male teenagers stronger by lifting weights and doing the things that I'd been traditionally taught. Little did I know, though, that's probably the lowest skill part of our job. It's really progressive overload and teenage males combined. There's no skill needed. And I firmly believe that's one of the reasons that it's so hard for schools or coaches or people in general to understand the importance of having a specialist in this involved in your program. And that could be a football coach, because I coached football for a long time after I considered myself a strength conditioning coach first. And I'm not saying I won't ever coach football again. I may just, for fun, right?
Right.
I'm just saying the idea that because your kids can win weightlifting championships, or your kids can break 1-rep max records, makes you some knowledgeable, that alone takes no skill at all. There's really no art to it. There's just the science of it. And you may not even understand the science, but it's pretty easy. A teenager wakes up in the morning and they're probably stronger than they were yesterday.
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of skill. I tell kids, I was telling, somebody was asking me the other day, I can't remember how we got on it. And I said, I used to go look through our lockers, and I still will do that. I'm about to start at a new school here in about a week, but I would go through our lockers and look at the supplements that kids are taking, and mostly it's creatine or protein. Well, I walk through and I see a kid who's probably 15 years old, and he's got a little jar of, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was essentially testosterone booster. And on the lid of that jar, it said $54.99. $54.99 this kid's spending this, and he's 15 years old. So I called him and I said, dude, what's this? He said, oh, yeah, I'm just trying to boost my testosterone. I said, brother, let me tell you something. I said, the chemicals you have running through your body right now, people that are 40 years and older pay a lot of money.
Yeah,
That's right.
To get. I said, take $54.99 a month and put it in food. And guess what? You won't need testosterone booster because you'll be jacked. It's just
That's right.
It's just so, I was at that point where a lot of people are, is that I'm bragging that I can make teenage males stronger under a barbell. Well, there's no skill to that. Like very little, if there's any. The skill comes in learning the art of understanding how to make those things move the needle for performance. I'm getting to the point now where I can't say it anymore, but I used to be able to say, I'd walk into any room with our athletes and say, I can bench and squat more than anybody in the room, or at least close to it. And I can't play a down of football anymore because I'm 40, 45, whatever. I'm 54 now. So, but, think about that. There needs to be other aspects that are developed. And when I walked into that room with Ethan, it really blew my mind. Tumbling. Why in the world are we tumbling? Well, coach, we tumble because we're learning control of our body and our brain, and it helps with concussion, and we're mobility. Mind blowing at that point.
boom, right?
Yeah,
Boom.
not as much, and then just little things. And then all of a sudden they get to the lift. And this was when Wake Forest was pretty doggone good back in the day. And these dudes are smoking it. Guys across the board, 350 to 4, doing power cleans at 350 to 400 pounds. And I'm like, well, and I don't think power cleans is a strength exercise, but you're pretty doggone athletic if you can clean that much. And it just kind of made me think, I have got to know more. And that just sent me down this rabbit hole of wanting to know why. And every time you overturn a why, there's 1,000 more questions to find why to. And that has been my life's pursuit since that moment was, don't step back and say, this is what we do. And, search out, is there a way to tweak that? Is there a way to, I used to be the guy that no matter what, I needed a certain level of back squat depth, and we were only going to, and then you realize that's really athlete by athlete. You can't set a, you've got to be able to look at a human being and understand enough about why they move in certain ways to be able to program what they need to be programmed. And then as that went, next thing you know, that leads to now we want to know more about speed, right? And that's where I stumble across Tony Holler and and different ways of training speed. And I used to be the guy that took absolute pleasure in running my kids into the ground because I thought, now we're tough. Now we're conditioned. In reality, and I am not, I think when people say the word conditioning, we talked about this at the beginning, everyone's conditioning their athletes. It's just, how are you doing it? And is the way you're doing it actually going to mean anything in their performance? Because I don't really think that a lot of back and forth 50 to 60 to 70% jogging is going to do much for guys because of the nature of the sport. One, people talk about, well, they're getting in shape. Well, they're moving way too fast for an aerobic capacity. I do zone 2 aerobic work now twice a week because I'm trying to keep my heart strong.
Right.
And I can tell you, it's unbearably slow, and you have to do it for 30 to 35 minutes or more to make it work. And there's a lot of science behind that. And I'm not an expert in it, but I've had experts tell me that. So that's how I train with it. You're not getting that you're not putting kids on exercise on ellipticals and having, so all they're doing is going at a pace that doesn't really help them with an aerobic pace or to get any faster. So, my idea of conditioning, and I tell people we do weak conditioning. You know what we do? We do tempo runs early in the off season, just to get guys moving a little bit, because that's usually right after Christmas. We'll do that for a little bit. We will do some of Cal Dietz conditioning, like where it's different movements for like 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off, 15 seconds on, 30 seconds off, 15, things like that. We'll do that early. And then as we get towards the actual summer practices, you can condition kids with change of direction tempo. We'll have them chase each other around a circle for 15 seconds. Every time we'll blow the whistle every couple seconds, and they change and change and change and change and change. They just keep chasing each other. And then at 15 seconds, we blow the whistle, and we have 4 groups going for 15 seconds each. Guess what that is? That's a 3-to-1 work to rest ratio. And, really, the closer you get to the season, the longer you want that work rest ratio, to be. And those are those are the ways, when you talk to like Garrett Mueller, he was with me this week up at the wing team. He talked about they don't do any conditioning, but they practice full speed.
Yeah.
When they go, they go. And then when they rest hard. That's conditioning. If you look at the definition of conditioning, it's preparing yourself for specific demands.
Right.
So, one, everyone's conditioning, whether they want to admit it or not. So this argument over conditioning or not conditioning is really arguing over whether you want to do, like back and forth slow running, distance running, or whether you're going to get that conditioning level through your practices or through your off-season drills. Everybody's conditioning. It's just we're arguing over methods, not really over whether we're conditioning or not conditioning.
Yeah, the approach to it.
Yeah, that's all you're arguing over. And guess what? You can't say either works specifically better than the other, because it comes down to your situation. Because you know what? There's been guys and guys now probably run their guys in the dirt and then go out and win. And there's guys that run their guys into the dirt and everybody's injured. So it's hard to, there's just, what people are really wanting to eliminate, and I think we'll get to this point with this kind of the feed the cats, sprint-based football stuff is already working. People just don't engulf themselves or dive into that stuff enough. All they see is the headline, so they get mad about it. And it's so dumb to do that. I look at high-level people posting stuff about, and I'm like, you're the dumbest smart guy I've ever been around. Because you don't know anything about this concept at all, and you're bashing it. Attend one of these things, and you'll see they are just using different methods to prepare their athletes for the sport. And it's
the thing that resonates with me too on that and what you're talking about is if your overall level, let's say your maximal level could be 10, okay, and you're by working with a method similar to Feed the Cats or like Feed the Cats, you can get to 9.5 of that 10, right?
Yes.
But if you train with the just bury them mentality and making them tough, your maximum level may only get to 8. So in a game, let's say in a game, you're up to if you're Feed the Cats, you're a level 9.5, and you get tired, you're down to a 9. But if you're only at an 8 normally, now you get tired just like anybody else does in the game, and maybe you're at 7.8 because you're in slightly more condition. The 9 level is still higher than the 7.8 because you reached a higher maximal level. And I think that was one of the things that really resonated with me is that the level of performance, your highest level of performance, getting towards that maximal point allows you, even when you start to everyone gets to a certain level of tiredness. And yes, maybe if we're running repeat 200 meters, you get a certain level of conditioning, but the speed doesn't equate to it. So by maximizing your level of explosion or speed, when you start to get tired, you now have a higher level that you're still performing at. And that's what resonates. And then there is to me a part. Obviously, you do need to have a certain level of sustainability with it because you're in a game and you don't want it to drop from 9.5 to 5.5, right? Because you're so gassed because you only did it, I don't know, one time and you're at your maximal level, but you don't have any level of. So there's a balance to it, in my opinion. But what resonates most to me is that if you can get that maximal level higher, okay, from an explosion speed level, that when you start to get tired, you're still at a much higher level than the guys that are working on this barium. And the barium kind of mentality also is a survival of the fittest, right? Yeah. Survival of the fittest mentality, meaning structural level, like genetic structural levels, right, of certain individuals are at different points in their career, right? So one 16-year-old maybe structurally there already that he can handle it, and even though it's probably not the optimal thing, he's able to survive it. Another 16-year-old who may get there eventually, you may break him down so much that he never, ever continues on because he's like, I can't get there because I can't handle this, and he's just not ready, from a structural standpoint. And that's what I also like about that focus on the rest and the focus on the maximal level. And I like what you said, adapting to the athletes where they are, because every athlete is at a different spot kind of in their development. You know what I mean? If you took young kids, my kid's 9, like my kid might be able to handle this, right? And then another kid who might be as good eventually, he may not be at that point where he can handle this, right? But if you put them all there, a kid who's bigger and stronger just genetically at a certain point is going to survive it more. And then the other kid goes and says, I don't want to play. I don't want to do this, right? And
survival, you don't want them. And that's one of the Feed the Cats things that I love. You're not trying to survive. You're trying to thrive. I know after every sprint-based football Feed the Cats event, there's this group of people that will go on there and attack and I just want to say, like, look, Dexter, like, bring your dudes down from Oregon or wherever you're at and put them on the field with all your zone 2 conditioning against the dudes at the school that I'm about to start coaching at here in Florida, and we won't do any zone 2 conditioning, and we will beat you by 100.
That's correct.
Because we have way better athletes, right? And it comes down to getting those athletes to perform, right?
Correct.
Yep.
And to argue that one method is just it's the bottom line is, one, those kids run and run and run and run and run. If you think about what kids do in practices all summer long, think about they're playing basketball, a lot of them. So then they're going to football practice and you're running all over the place. I know for a fact, we played, when I was in South Carolina, we played 34 total 7-on-7 games one summer, 34, including 14 in one day. In one day at a big University of South Carolina tournament. And I had GPS on. I know how many yards. Now, here's what, Dexter, the lab hound's going to say, well, GPS is an incomplete, picture. Yeah, no kidding. But it still gives us more of a picture, more information than we had before.
Right.
And you know what? Guess what? If the three of us just said, hey, we're going to do a coach's challenge. We're going to walk 10 to 14 miles a day, 3 days a week, all summer long. Even less than that, guess we're all going to be in great shape, even at our age. Now you put these kids out there that they're doing that, and then they're also going to basketball practice in the off days, running around. I think the last thing that high school kids have to worry about is level of conditioning, because it's so neurological anyway. Why do kids cramp week 1? I promise you, it's not because they didn't run. Because what is the first 2 weeks of football practice like in most cases? They've been going at it all summer. We ran 18. We built up and we did this one time. It wasn't my idea, but I was all for it back in the day. We started, and twice a week we would run 110s. And we started with 8, and we worked up to I kid you not, we were doing 15, 18 in a day. And then we go into football practice, and we're practicing twice a day, just getting after it, running all over the place. Coaches, go, 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 go. And then you get to week 1, kid catches a cramp, and the first thing everyone wants to say is their conditioning level's down. It's not their conditioning level. It's their neurological stress level. Why is it all of a sudden you run the dog snot on those kids? The most yardage they're going to get in those 2 weeks. I mean, it's crazy. And I know from GPS data. And then first 2 weeks is when the cramps happen. Why do you think that is? I don't know. Could it be that those are the first 2 really live sessions that they're getting? The first 2 high pressure sessions, the first 2 sessions where the coaches are, on the sideline, you make a mistake, coaches are getting on you. One of my roles as a strength conditioning coach, and I don't know what my new role, I'm going to an awesome school, man. I'm so happy to be coaching at Newberry High School here in Florida. It's just, the coaches are awesome. I mean, I can't wait, but I don't know what my role will be yet because everybody's nice right now. I've been at a school. The last school I was at, North Carolina, before I went to South Carolina, I was at Piedmont High School. And my role there had to be the heavy. The coach was nice. He didn't yell and scream much. He was more of a, relationship builder. And so what they needed me to do was get on guys about effort. And I coach football, so it's easier when you've coached football, the kids just look at you like a football coach. So it's a little bit, so that was my role. Then I went to York Comprehensive High School in South Carolina. And our coaches got on the guys. Like, I mean, it was like they were on them. So I didn't have to do that. I never had to raise my voice, because if there was an effort problem in the weight room, because we had football class, with the head coach, defensive coordinator, myself were in every day, 180 days a year. I didn't have to say anything because the football coaches would nail them. I just had to drive the intent, and my job was to uphold their culture. So my job on Friday night was to try to help prevent those cramps. You know, you got nutritional, you've got all these other things. But one way I felt like I was helping prevent that and keep our guys going in the fourth quarter was when they would get blown up, or they would, getting, screaming, yelling, coaches are going at them, and they're, my job to go over there and put my arm around them and get their central nervous system back into a parasympathetic mode, into a performance mode, because they were in straight fight or flight. And you can't play football when you're in fight or flight. Like, you just can't. Like, you have to be able to think on the run, and that's going to impair your ability to think, which is going to impair your ability to make decisions, which is going to make you cramp, because of now when your ability to make decisions is impaired, your brain is in panic mode. It starts shutting things down, and it wants to pull you back from doing things. So you're going to get some cramps, right? Because you're gonna have an issue there. So my goal was to help them neurologically.
Explain how that whole works, because that's a very, very new thing that a lot of people do not understand, the neurological impact. And you're talking about the fight or flight. If you could, how does that work with related to like performance, and how that kind of genesis of
the first thing I'm going to suggest is, if you haven't had him on yet, you need to get. He's one of the best football coaches as well as a strength coach. His name's Dan Fichter, and he's in New York. If you haven't got him on, ask him this same question. And his level, I've learned a lot of this from him. This is what I tell people when I talk about this. I'll do some neurological resets and things, and the kids will be like just blown away, and they'll be like, "Oh God, you're like a Jedi, with this Jedi trick." I said, I might be a Jedi but I'm like the Luke Skywalker when he landed on Yoda's planet. He knew that there was a force, but he really didn't know how to control it. Dan Fichter is Yoda. So let me premise by saying that you need to get Dan Fichter on. But basically, you're never all the way to one side or the other of a parasympathetic or a sympathetic mode. Sympathetic, essentially, the fight or flight mode, where your body is going to shut down a lot of things because it knows it thinks you're in a lot of danger. So it's gonna kind of get you more internally ready to either, fight for your life or flee. A parasympathetic mode is where you're very relaxed and you have your full functioning, and essentially it all goes back to this. Inputs control outputs. So when your brain is able to pull inputs in and do a good job of solving what it sees as problems from those inputs quickly, you're going to perform better. You're going to be able to move faster. You're going to be able to make better decisions. You want to be in a more parasympathetic mode to be able to do that, because you have you essentially have your full width. And you're never going to be totally the one way. That's kind of a switch, right? A dimmer switch. So, for example, when a guy he's made a bad play, okay? And I'm so guilty of this when I was a football coach, of just getting in the guys. I was just going to get in his grill and blow him up, and then he was going to learn. Guy makes a mistake. He comes off the sideline. He's already crushed by a mistake, coaches are screaming and yelling at him. You're driving them further into that sympathetic fight or flight mode, and you can see it. They just get like this, and they go and they sit on the bench and they drop their head. They are not going to perform the way they're capable of right there, And everybody has a little bit different level of that based on all kinds of things. Like someone like I had a quarterback many, many years ago who it didn't matter what you said to him or what you did to him, as far as if he made a mistake and you got on him, he was just going to come right back at you. He was always going to be in that parasympathetic mode for the most part. And then I look back, and then we have another quarterback after he graduates the very next year that when he made a mistake, if you got on him, he was gone for the rest of the game because you could never get him back out of that mode. And what happens? They make mistake after mistake, and it builds up. Well, that's because their brains now, the inputs are coming in, and their brain can't function in a way that allows them to solve those problems fast enough. And when you look at the sport, Scott Leach said this in a great article. I've said it before, but the way he said it was perfect. He's the performance guy at Rhode Island. Essentially, any invasion sport, which football is, comes down to these two factors. The whole goal of the sport, when you're on offense, is to create space for the football. And the whole goal of the sport when you're on defense is to constrict space for the football to go through. So performance needs to be looked at only in how can we help our athletes create space when we're on offense and help our athletes constrict space when we're on defense. Well, guess what? Most of that doesn't happen in the squat rack. Most of that doesn't happen on the bench. Most of that doesn't happen on the track because you hardly ever run full speed in a football game. So when does it happen? It needs to be, you need to be able to teach your athletes to make faster decisions. And when your athletes can close that OODA loop, that decision loop in their brain faster, they're going to be better football players. How can you create, I just did a presentation on this up at Wayne T. How can you create, I sent it to you, Coach. You liked it, didn't you?
I loved it.
So how can you create an ecosystem and an environment of football that is focused only on creating separation and closing separation? That's it. That's all that matters. Sometimes it is squat. Our guys need to be a little bit stronger. Our offensive linemen particularly need to be stronger so we can create bigger holes. Our defense, but a lot of times it's neuro. It comes down to they just can't make decisions fast enough. So what can we do within our performance program, within our practices, to help them solve problems? It's simple. I said this you probably saw this, Coach. Everyone can answer 2 + 2. That's 4. 10 times 10, it's 100. Why can we answer those? So especially guys, well, Coach Derek, you look a little young, but if you're in your mid 40s and older, how they taught us math was we were handed a sheet.
Yep.
1 = 2, 2 + 2 = 4. Repetition, 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 repetition. All right, what's the square root of 3,474? I have no idea. Do you? Without a calculator? But there are people that can solve that problem. Now, they either are unbelievably talented from birth or they learned. Now, take that to the football players. Every one of us has coached a kid that we've sat in a room and said, he's too short, he can't run, but doggone, he is a football player. Right? Well, guess what? You know what made him a football player? Because he didn't have the physical skills that normally you would consider a football player. What made him a football player? His advanced ability to solve problems on the field. He just closed his decision loop faster than anybody else. So that's how he was able to win battle after battle after battle. And everybody knows, I was telling the guys the other day, I have 2 off the top of my head. I had 2 kids that were among the fastest runners, highest jumpers, best agility scores, unbelievable. Could triple broad jump, 33, 35 feet. And neither of them could play a lick of football. Neither of them. They couldn't close they had no ability to close a decision loop, so they were worthless except for in those performance areas. So the whole aspect of our performance program really stop thinking about muscular outputs. Muscles are just hanging pieces of meat without the brain. You know, if you're brain dead, you can't play football because you're brain dead, like you're dead, right? You're essentially, once your brain goes, the computer is just this box. Your muscles are just, the brain is the key to everything. And if we would just take a big step back and everybody would say, hey, let's figure out what inputs cause the best outputs in our athletes and what inputs are we weak at, and then attack those, you would have better football players faster because of that central nervous system, learning how to keep them calm enough to make good decisions, but then also building into that the ability to make decisions quicker. Find out, watch film, and I know this because I did this the last 2 years when I was at in Charlotte helping out. I watched every snap of 2 seasons of football, and I wrote down all the areas of why plays did or didn't work based on each athlete, and I graded it by position group so that I could go to our head coach and say, whatever we're doing for our linebackers in practice isn't working because they were graded D- in making plays. You know, I've actually told a football coach that I worked with for 1 year once this. I kept getting emails about, we're not strong enough, we're weak, we're not strong enough, da 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 da. Well, I knew the kids' maxes. So from a barbell standpoint, we were plenty strong enough. So my point to this, and this is my recommendation to all football coaches, look at the film, and before you just make a random declaration that we're not strong enough, because you could look not strong enough really easy and it not have anything to do with strength. You know, I'm strong, but if you put me on the field with a much weaker but better athlete, I would look weak, you know. So look at your film, and before you decide it's strength or speed or anything, watch your athletes and their reaction to what you're coaching them to do. Where were their eyes? What was their joint angle? Were they low enough? Were their hips an issue? You know, I used to get that a lot. How can we get this kid stronger? He keeps getting blown up, and we need him to be better at 3 technique. So I'm looking at this kid's numbers, and you know, he's a 500-pound squatter and a 300-pound bencher. I mean, I don't know how much stronger I can make this kid. So let's look at the film. Guess what he does? He can't stay low because his hips are trash.
Right.
Well, I can help with that. And it doesn't have anything to do with getting him stronger, right? So look at the film, find out what caused the breakdown. I guarantee you're going to find 90% of the time it doesn't have anything to do with strength. Where were their eyes? I told you to read the guards. Why'd you go that way? The running back went that way. The guard went that way. Well, guess what? That didn't have anything to do with strength, right? I made the right read, but I took the wrong steps and I got blocked. Well, it doesn't matter how strong you are on that down block, right? And an offensive tackle come down on a linebacker on the backside. No matter what you do, you're in trouble unless you get in position to beat him, right? And how do you get in position to beat him? You use your brain. That input drives your output, and you make a great decision, and you beat that guy, right? So that's kind of the long and long of it.
Yeah, no, the position you're in at the point of attack, whatever that point of attack is very, very important because it dictates the force and leverage and speed you're able to put into it. And I told Derek this example. So when I was in college, I played at UConn, and we played. I probably told him this story 20 times, but we played against this running back. His name was Jerry Azuma. We played in the pros. Actually, he was a running back in college, but he ended up playing defensive back for 6-7 years in the NFL. And I was a linebacker, and I was, a high 4.5s guy, 230 pounds, for FCS, pretty good size and athleticism. And this guy tackling him, he was probably about a buck, I don't know, maybe a buck 90 at about 5'10". And tackling him was very difficult. It required every single ounce of my energy and force. And it's funny you talk about cramping. It was like the second or third game. By the end of the game of tackling him, I sat out, I would say, half of the fourth period because I was cramping on and off and on and off. And I was actually playing a great game. But the issue was tackling him. Okay. And the issue was tackling him because the amount of, even though he wasn't that big, the amount of force and speed combination and the angle I could get to tackle him was always difficult. I could never get a great angle on tackling him because his athleticism and quickness and force he was generating all in one little tiny space was very, very difficult. The only way I could ever equate it was it felt like he was never, his body didn't stop moving. So even if you grabbed him, it never stopped moving, right? He was always moving and changing direction even as you had him. And it would take all my force to bring him down. And doing that over and over again with the fight-flight response that you're talking about created a stress level that I remember in the fourth quarter. I was like, I never cramped. All of a sudden, I was cramping, and and I think about the stuff that we're learning about now. I think back to my own performance, and Derek, you probably think back to yourself when you had some of these things happen, right? As an athlete, and I think back, and I thought this one person was causing a level of stress, even though I was playing very well, but he was so difficult. He was the most difficult guy that I played against in my career to bring down. There's no coincidence he was a pro and an NFL player. And it was because my athleticism and power and strength, it didn't matter what I did in the weight room, relative to what his was and how he was able to generate on the field was not adequate. That's why it required me to do so much effort just to bring him down.
I would say
times for me. So
I'd say a couple things with that, with never had just listen to your story. One, with your cramping, you were getting so frustrated that your body was shifting that little knob into a more sympathetic mode because you were just frustrated with the whole situation. Two, and I would say this probably about every professional football player, no matter how long they play in the league, they're all elite decision makers. That's why. So your frustration had a lot to do with he was able to close you couldn't get a square shot on him because he could close his decision loop faster than you could close yours and get there.
Correct.
So all of those things combined was causing that. And I think that goes back to how we work with well, at least when I was at Metrolina in Charlotte, how we worked our practices was we did everything we could to simulate live versus live movement, meaning, don't say, hey, you're going to go here and I'm going to meet you here, but just, try to increase your body's ability to take those inputs and convert them to outputs by solving those problems fast, by doing things in practice that happened very quickly. There was probably no way for anyone on your team to simulate.
There was no one to simulate that.
Right. So that becomes
he was the best player we face all year. Yeah. There's no one to simulate.
100%. Like you're not going to face that every week in practice, or it's you can't simulate that.
Yeah, it goes back to you still have to have, and people might listen to this and say, "Well, so you just don't have to lift or run or anything; you can just solve problems." But see, then you've got another problem, right? You need to have that adequate, size, speed, strength. It's just how you define that strength. You don't necessarily have to define it by barbell. You have to have the adequate level of that to play at whatever level you play at, and just look at different levels of high school football. You coach at a very small school in the smallest classification in in a state that doesn't have a lot of great football players. And then you take that team to a state, another place, and you might have been able to dominate your situation, but now the level of your opponent has gone up. when I went to Metro Atlantic Christian, they had played in, 2 or 3 of the previous 5 years in their state championship at the lower level, or played for at least for a Western final. And the first year I went there, they bumped up to where they were playing to win in the playoffs. You had to beat teams that were going to throw out, teams that recruited kids, essentially private schools that recruited kids.
Right.
Well, no matter what you did, say what you want, you can't judge the coaches on wins and losses in that game, because you're playing against your level of athlete just isn't high enough to be competitive with that. You still need to have that adequate level of athlete that can do all the things, and that's still a big part of what I do as a performance coach. It's just, instead of putting barbell in the center of my wheel. So here's the wheel of being good at football. A lot of people have barbell as the center of the wheel, and then coming off is all the different aspects. What I've learned over the years is take barbell out and just make that one of the spokes, right? And in the middle, put performance. And underneath performance for football, you write, on offense, create space. On defense, close space. Now our spokes need to reflect what that center says. And, sometimes it is the weight room, especially for younger guys.
Right.
It is the weight room. But then you can't just get caught up in that's the only thing. Just like you can't get caught up in and is speed the only thing. No, because 2 of the 3 fastest kids I've ever timed couldn't get on the field. We tried. They were terrible at football, right? It comes down to all of those factors together. So you can't put any of those one thing in the middle. It has to all be performance. And the problem that I see is too many coaches, in my experience, and then I talk to coaches, and my main job here is coach education, right? At Simply Faster. Too many coaches are unable to take that ego part of it out and just say,
it's so hard.
Yes, it is hard, because I still get excited when our kids are, I absolutely know for a fact that 1 rep max is really a pointless metric in performance in football, because
we still get all juiced up when that kid hits it.
I'm telling you, it's and people ask me about that, like, do you max your kids? And I'm like, I just do whatever the football coach wants to do. I don't care, because I have other ways of figuring out how to load the bar, velocity-based training, things like that. But when I was at York, that was one of the things our head football wanted to be part of the culture. He would bring a DJ in, get pizza, T-shirts. It was a huge.
It was a cultural thing, not necessarily
right.
Right.
And the kids.
That's a program thing.
That's a program, and those kids probably loved it, right? It was the best, greatest thing. Look, we still do, parts of that, and now, it's all there. It's part of it. It's kind of, it's what a lot of guys do it.
Yeah, and if you do that, and it's not like my problem with 1 rep max is coaches that make it the focal point of their program. There's our board. That board
doesn't
mean a whole lot. And every once in a while, some coach will be like, every one of my players is also my strongest. First of all, you're full of it.
Yeah.
I don't believe that even for a second, because I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and it's
way too long.
You always got that dude up there that can bench and squat and do all this other stuff. His name was Mark Hoover back in the time. That wasn't very good at football. So I don't believe that for a second. But
it doesn't translate. It just doesn't move.
If you whatever, and I heard Austin Yoakum say this on Just Fly Sports podcast, and I love to be a master thief in this space, because that's the way to do it. Find someone that's doing something or says something really great that's impactful and steal it and make it your own. You might have to adjust it, but make it your own. He said, whatever you emphasize to the kids is what they're going to chase. So if you emphasize bench, squat, and power clean, they're going to chase that. And unfortunately, I hate to break the news, that is going to be to a detriment eventually. Eventually, that's going to be to a detriment because they're going to not understand when it's time to do other things, why those things are important.
Yep.
And the people that say that those is how they win championships, I guarantee you are coaching freak athletes.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
We had
30
guys. We had 30 guys clean 275 or more. Well, guess what? That's probably not the reason that you won a championship. The reason you won a championship and probably had 30 guys that cleaned 275 or more is because you got 30 freaks.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or at least 20.
Coach, I'll give you a great example right now of kind of like what we're going at. Like we have a run rep max and all those kind of things, but you just see some of these, maybe sophomores that are maybe saw a little time. They're trying to get on the field. They're so enamored, right, with that one rep number, that max, right, that they don't understand why we're doing 5 sets of 5 at this weight percentage wise for 3 weeks, right? They want to constantly, it's almost like I have to it's like, hey, this is what goes on the bar. This is what you're doing. Okay. These supplementals that we are doing are to increase this. Yes, but this isn't the end all be all. Right. And you need to trust that process, right? Because they're constantly, it's like, dude, why are you failing on your second set at 2 when you're supposed to be crushing this weight because next week it's going to be this and then it's that. They don't understand that. One, because they're chasing that, they think that's what's going to get them their playing time. They're also like, their best buddy who's, like Dave said, more developed already and is pushing more weight, and now they don't look the same as him, right? So now in the calf, that guy's like, yeah, dude, you can't even bench what I do, right? There's a little bit of that going on, and it's, it's healthy, but it's understand the process of why we're doing these things. And that's what's really hard about football. That's across the board with the game itself. Everything is built off something coming down the road. And it's not immediate, right? It's not that immediate reward that society itself is. That's where we're at right now. They need that.
That's a great point you brought up there. Like the why that we're doing. Like to me, like one of the things with the 1 rep max that's always bothered me, even when I was a player. Was that is the juice worth the squeeze on it? Meaning, think about, and you too, Mark, when you got underneath that bar, you're going for your maximum amount. You're also in the back of your head is like, I don't want to get hurt while I'm going for this maximum amount, right? So I want to make sure my technique is exactly right. Yeah. But why are you thinking about it in that way? Because you're worried not just about getting the weight up, but you're also worried about, like, I don't want to get hurt doing this 1 rep max that I'm pushing. Like, that's why my issue. Now, listen, I did it. Derek did it. You did it. We've all done it. I am not a huge, one of the things, this is a long time ago that I saw this. It kind of changed my thought process on a lot of things. I can't remember the strength coach that came out with this, but it was when USC was really good in the Matt Leinart era. That was in the 2000s. And he put out a thing called 300, 400, 500, meaning bench squat clean, and it was like clean 300, 400 bench and 500 squat. And he says you never need, and I'm not saying this is 100% correct, but it kind of changed my thinking. He said they do not need to do any more than that as their maximum amount, because the juice isn't worth the squeeze beyond that. So meaning like structurally, even if they're strong enough, like even you might have a lineman that can squat 700. Is it worth the squeeze for his back to squat 700, right? So I thought it was more about like, again, even back then he was talking about how important it was to get the level of performance and speed. And this is before, feed the cats and all those kind of things. But it changed the way I thought about it, because I was like, Like we don't need to. We don't. He's like he felt like there was a diminishing return with respect to injury,
No doubt.
all that kind of stuff.
I can tell you this: a couple things when I was in York, because that was probably the place I coached the freakiest athletes that I've ever coached up till. From what I've seen about Newberry, I'm about to get into another level there. But one thing, we had this running back that a great kid, just didn't like to go to class. He'd be playing Division I football if he would have liked to go to class, or even went to class. But so
he could have just showed up and smiled and you'd been fine, dude. But sometimes you got to be a little present.
I saw a video of him in the 8th grade doing a back squat 315 for 5. Right? He comes up 9th grade, probably maxes it like 4 something. Going into his sophomore year, we're doing a max in the spring, and he smokes 505. We had BBT on the bar. He hit 505, and I'm not sure how familiar you are, but strength level is essentially 0.5 down. There's different. He smokes this thing at like 0.55. So 505 is like 70% of his max, right? Smokes it. And even the head football coach who was a big, like, I love 1 rep max guy, but we talked a lot about this. He looked at me and said, he's probably good, right? And I said, yeah, because does it matter if we write up on the board? Like, if you just want to write up on the board 545, go ahead, because he could do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But does it matter? Like, is he going to be – he was such a stud. Like, I mean, it was unbelievable. And then the other story from York was probably the best athlete I've ever coached to this point. Total freak. He played receiver for us, but he went to a charter school in York, but we were his home school. The charter school didn't have football, so he could come play football at our school. We had him in the 9th grade in our weightlifting football class, and he refused to lift. Like, it was, nonstop. So coaches already had a bad taste about him. His sophomore year, he comes out, maybe it was his junior year, junior, he comes out and he scores 13 touchdowns on kick, punt, returns. 13. A few of those got called back because he was so good. He could make a cut so fast that some of them weren't. I mean, it was unbelievable. Total freak. You just get him the ball in his hands, and he weighed 160 pounds, about 5'9", 160. Just a jitterbug. Like one of those water bugs you see on the on the top of the water jumping around. That was him. So he doesn't lift with us all off season, right? Until summer starts, because he's at the other school. So he comes over and we're squatting one day, and he has like 155 on there. He's like going like half squats. And coaches are they're already on him. Oh, there he can't lift. Da, 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 da. So the coach is like, will you go talk to him about his squat, about his the squat depth? So I go over there and I said, hey, Javon, listen, man, just go a little bit deeper. You can do it. You just got to get back in. You haven't squatted in a while, so let's just, if it was me, I'd have pulled him aside, put him on a goblet squat, and taught him how to squat again. But we weren't going to do that in that situation. Again, you just got to be with the culture that you're in. And he wasn't doing anything dangerous. So, I just kind of worked him on that. So then I go back and he's doing a little bit better squat. Well, he's not adding much weight. He's at, I think he's doing 185, right? 5 reps or whatever, maybe his third set. Coaches are fussing. Look, he's not adding any weight. And he wasn't doing what he was supposed to do as far as percentages. But I didn't care because, 1, it was his first workout back, and I didn't want him to be sore. But 2, who cares? You know what I'm saying? So I went over to him. They wanted me to get on him again about his weight. And I went over to him and I said, hey, Vaughn, I said, man, it's great having you back. You just keep what you're doing. You're doing a great job. I slapped on the back and walked away. And he might have added a little more, might not. But the coaches thought I'd at least talk to him about it. I didn't, because my whole point is, what if he'd have put 225 on there and done it for 5 instead of 185? would that have led to 15 touchdowns the next year? No.
Yep.
No. Why? As long as, don't tell me he's not strong, because you know what strong is? Running 22 miles an hour, put your foot in the ground, stop, cut, and get back to 22 miles an hour within a blink. That's
Absolutely.
strong. You don't have to be strong under the barbell to be strong. No one was stronger than that dude because you couldn't tackle him. And now let's go back to the circle of performance, right? That dude was able to create space to move the ball through without any blockers, without anything. You could have put him out there 1 versus 5, and 3 out of 5 reps, he'd have beat all 5 guys. So my point being, why chase those barbell weights with some of these kids? I'm more worried about screwing them up because he puts too much weight on there and gets hurt than chase. If it makes you feel better, coach, write up on the board that he can squat 275, if that makes you feel better. Because no one really cares about that board when it comes down to performance. Last story on this line. Doesn't have anything to do with weights, but it has to do with performance. I had a guy at Metrolina, receiver, that was uncoverable because he ran about a 4.7, 4.8 legit. But we taught him Tony Villani's game speed curriculum, and he just could get open. He actually texted me some video this morning. He's going into his junior year now, so I could evaluate his route running. But he gets there and he texts me and he's in a panic. He's like, Coach, I'm in a lot of trouble with my receiver coaches because they tell me I'm not running the route fast enough, right? And I said, listen, you gotta do what your coach is saying in these drills, right? So go through the drills and do whatever the coaches tell you to do, because you got to get on the field and you got to execute. I said, once you get on the field and you execute, they are not going to give 2 craps whether you run your routes fast or run your routes the way you know how to get open. Sure enough, I think he scored 6 or 7 touchdowns, was like their 3rd leading receiver, small Division I school. And when he texted me his highlight film and we got to talking about it after a few games, I said, let me guess, they haven't said one word about your route running anymore, have they? Because they don't care how fast you run your routes. They just want you to get open.
Correct.
It all comes down to that point, right? That's the point. So anyway, with that, guys, I'm afraid I'm going to have to run. I got someone coming to the house to do a repair here in a few minutes, and they're calling me on the phone. But this was awesome, and I really appreciate you guys having me on. If there's anything I can do for either of you guys in the future or want to share more information or talk more, all you gotta do is let me know. I will talk all day long. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt. Thanks so much, Coach, for coming on.
Fits right in with us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's right in. No doubt about it. You make the podcast easy, Coach. We don't have to ask that many questions. So you make it nice and easy. So you're welcome anytime. We don't have to come up with too many questions, 1 or 2, and you're rolling. So we're
Hey,
Coach, appreciate it, man. Good luck at that good luck at your new spot, man. I know you're going to do great things. I know you're excited about it. Really, I appreciate it.
Awesome. Awesome stuff, Coach. Thank you.
All righty.
Have a great day. Bye.
Take care.
That was phenomenal.
Gotta get him back on.
It's really interesting, the whole how strength and conditioning and performance development is really evolving. It's funny because you go, and there's some things too from like the old times that, like, when guys were way ahead of the curve, like the old Nebraska guys that like come back around, like some of
absolutely. It's just like anything, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you see concepts in the game itself starting to come back around, right? It all just works. I think the shift more now to, we're not just doing things in practice and in the off season to just do them for whatever, right? We are doing them, like, how do we make it as close to game type situations, which has always been an issue with football because it's hard to replicate a football game off outside of a football game. So how do we do these that can really put our guys in the optimal situation to do really, really well and perform at a high level? Game time.
Yeah,
because of football is so different, right? Like we can get out on a basketball court, dude, and we can go 5-on-5 and we can go up and down and we'll be fine. You can't go live in practice every day.
Have you tried any of the RPR stuff on yourself,
dude?
Have you done it all? I've been
without diving into I love it. I'm like, whoa.
All right. Now, I this is not a study yet. Okay, so this is not. I do it on myself because it does make me feel better. Amazingly, like I feel more aware. But I've done it with my son in 3 games out of 4. Okay, before 3 games out of 3 of the last 4 games. In the 3 games that he's done it, he's averaging 16 points a game. And his passing and his cognitive, just watching him on the court, has looked great. Now, this could be me seeing it through and the game that he did, we didn't do it because we kind of rushed to get there or whatever.
Right.
It was not a great game for him. Okay.
Not optimal.
Scored like 5 points, but not, it's not just the points, but like overall play was sporadic. Right. So I'm going to keep doing it, and then sometimes not do it just to kind of see if there is something there. But I do it when I do it myself. I find there is something to like a relaxation point of it, but not relaxing like you're going to take a nap, meaning a calming that you're
almost puts you in a zone.
Yes, more focused, like a more focused zone, and it's interesting. Now, this is a lot of the science aspect of training, of the mental aspect, and now the whole nervous system thing.
Yep.
Obviously, it's in the history of time of human beings, it's obviously a very new industry, right? So we're all learning a lot, and it's evolving. And I just think back to when I was doing speed and development and started coaching track, and my thought process of how you develop speed then to how I think about it now, and then how I thought about how you develop athletes then versus now. It has changed a lot. But it's very interesting because the thing I think about the most is, how do I get them to the field healthy and be able to perform well?
Correct.
Because when they're not healthy, they're obviously not going to perform as good as they could.
Absolutely. No way.
Right. And they're also probably stressed more, right?
Well,
because I'm not feeling that great. Like, think about yourself, right? Like
mentally, dude, you just go into that, it's that poor me. Maybe that's not the right way to put it. It's not a poor me type of, it's just like you just don't feel
right. Like, think about the games you played in when, for the most part, you felt mostly right versus when you went in there kind of beat up and you didn't feel right. All the things that were going on in your head.
Practice 1 of every season is the only practice you're fully healthy, right? Like how cliche is that line, but how true is it when you literally play at that? I mean, look, there wasn't a game where, especially for a guy like me that was usually undersized or whatever, that I wasn't in the training room because, all right, what are we dealing with this week? Oh, it's a thumb. Oh, okay. Oh, I got cut blocked in the open field and now I got, a bruise here or something that wasn't going to really, but it was here.
Right.
How do I overcome that? Now, on top of it, I got a coach that's going to stress me out even more. And now, because you got to play right, you got to 1,000 things going through your head, and that's before we get to any of the X's and O's.
Yeah, and I think in what's interesting about practice, and I thought he talked a lot about this, and I've done it a lot in football, but I'm trying to do it more and more in everything that I kind of do with kids athletically. Is create like this or that situations. Here's the ball. I'll use basketball, for example. I'm going to pass you the ball in the lane. You either go for a layup or you shoot it on the run. Like, you make that decision. Whatever you think you're going to do best at, you go do that.
That's what you do.
I want but make them make a decision, not like 5 decisions, but like a decision, and teach them how to make a decision and make it quickly. And then they get better at making that decision, and then they feel probably less stressed when in the game they have to make some decision like that. But starting to get that, because I noticed in sports, and being honestly doing these podcasts with you in the last 190 whatever episodes, one of the things I've learned from all these coaches is that helping them to make a decision and helping them to putting them in situations where they have to make a decision, not an overly stressful decision, but a decision,
decision
that they can make, right? And then building on that makes them probably better. Whereas a coach in the game, you can evaluate more what they're doing, where their mistakes are, versus having a false expectation of what you think they can do. Right? Because you're expecting them to do this, but they've never been in any kind of situation like that.
How do you you're expecting them to do this, yet you've never – I go back to like Bill Belichick and how the Patriots ran for all those years. Everything was situational. They put them through situations that may have happened one time in 25 years. But you know what? I'm going to now allow my players to go through it as close to a game situation as possible so that they understand it. So when it happens in a game, they're not all over the place. Oh my goodness, everything's out of control. They see it, they do it. And that's a huge piece of that level of comfort allows people to open up, be who they are, all that kind of thing. Now add that and put it to a sports mentality, right? Like now you can kind of put them in those situations where now we're not worried about X, Y, and Z because we know this is what it is. As a player, you're going to now perform better. Period.
There's no doubt about it. It's a really important thing to evolve from a coaching standpoint. That a lot of and again, winning can trick you as a coach. Winning can trick you. You have the better athletes.
That's it. We always go Jimmy's and Joe's, right? Jimmy's and Joe's. Like, it's a lot.
You have excellent athletes. You have a system that, let's say it's a system that is, kind of tried and true to a certain extent, but doesn't necessarily maximize what your guys do. But you know what you're going to get every single time, and you win a lot, and you have better athletes, and it tricks you into thinking that you're the best. Now, what you are great at is structure, right? And you deserve credit for that. You deserve tremendous credit for structure. You're maybe not great at performance, right? There are different things. So
100%.
You get tricked as a coach, and I think his point about continuing to learn is such an important thing because if you are great at structure, let's say as a coach you're great at structure, you're great at like devising plans and making things, you do that really well, which is very important as a coach. Okay,
absolutely.
And let's say you're excellent at motivation, which is very important as a coach, but you don't necessarily understand what gets athletes to perform, right? So that's maybe a third piece that you've got to be able to figure out. You just figure that, you can yell them into it all the time, right? Well, once you figure out that performance part of it, now you go to being a really good coach, to being an elite coach. You go to go from you're taking your team to the playoffs every round, every year, which means most time will get you in the Hall of Fame. Okay, to winning championships every time, right? Yep. So, and it's now if you didn't have the good athletes, you wouldn't win those championships because if you
doesn't matter,
you could have all three phases and be at a terrible group, not have a group of athletes and just not win a lot of games. So, and there were guys that, like, I remember when I was a young coach, they used to be like, I remember they'd say, "Oh, this guy's a heck of a." There was a guy at Park Ridge who was. He probably his record overall as a career maybe was 500. He passed away a few years ago. He was always really nice to me when I was a coach. He was older at the time, and they used to always say, "Oh, you play him, you're gonna have to be ready. He's a great coach." And I'm like, his teams are okay, But what you didn't realize was he was taking a lot. He was doing a lot with not that much.
Right.
And you would play him and you'd be like, I got way better athletes. Like, why is this a
Right.
game?
I should be winning this game. Like, why am I
is
not?
this a game? Because
those are the guys that are
right. So he just didn't. He liked that place. He was a teacher there. He was a coach there. He was at a public school. He was going to get what he was going to get.
Right.
And
why doesn't this guy go somewhere else? Like,
but when he had a couple of times, he had some great players and he won championship. Okay. But for the most part, he was in those like 5-5 modes. And as a young coach, I'd be like, this guy's not great. But I learned that this guy actually was great. It was just that he was maximizing what he had, right? So that's an important thing as a coach to be able to figure out how to, if you're great at this, you're great at that. As a coach, you're great at that, and maybe you're weak in performance, you get somebody in that's great at performance with you, right? If you're great at structure and you need motivation, you get guys that are motivated, can help you with motivation. And I think obviously being a structured coach is very important because it sets the stage. But the other elements obviously can be equally as important. It's an interesting, and that's what I'm learning from a lot of the podcasts we've done. You're taking these tidbits from these guys, and you're like, you know what? Let me do this next time in practice because I think this can help us maybe perform better. And then sometimes it translates right into court, and sometimes you do it, and you're like, you know what? This isn't. They're not ready for this, And
I think that's part of it too. Is like you got to know what you have on your team, like, and what works one year might not work another year. And these are the things like where if you're constantly like always just trying to improve, trying to get better, looking for things like now with the way social media is and the network, that is, guys always want to go to these clinics and listen to guys talk about in the NFL or college. Dude, you can learn so much from other high school coaches. And I'm not talking just X's and O's, structure, motivation, fundraising, whatever it is, dude. These guys, like, everybody has something. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, awesome, coach, that works for you, not going to work for us. But you have to go and find those things. You have to be, you have to be willing to kind of, again, put your pride aside, right? And not my way is the only way. There's 1,000 ways to do things. And if you really want to be great, man, like just go figure it out and go.
Tarek, what, and I haven't figured out a way to monetize this yet. But what me and you really should have a career in is in networking and connecting people. I haven't figured out how you actually make a tremendous amount, like a career out of that. But that's probably what we should be. That's probably what our career should be. I just don't know. Exactly how you make a great cash for that. So if you look that up and you figure that out, and we get together, then that's probably what we should do. But it is like it's
and I used to be one of those guys. Like, I'm going to go to a clinic and I'm going to listen to this guy because he's at this college. I don't want to listen to a high school coach, yada, yada. Who cares? He's this and he's that. He's at some small school, whatever. What does that mean? Like, that don't mean shit, dude. Like, the guys that you think are the least because they're at a small school or maybe they don't win as much as everybody else. Like, those are the guys you can get the most from because they're making the most out of what they have to work with. And it changes. It evolves. It's you're constantly polishing that sculpture that you want to improve. And you also have to adapt with what's going on in society and how just the world we're living in is, Yep. We're guys that we look at and say, well, when we did it or the way it was, like, yeah, that's just a reference point. That's not what I feel it should be or the right way to do it. It's just like, that's how it was. This is how it is now. Adapt or get out of it. Like a lot of these guys are. Like, it's just, you're impacting lives on too high of a level to just kind of say, oh, well, this is how we do it. Like, that's
you know what else we overvalue? No, you know what else we overvalue as coaches? We overvalue our ability to try to will a kid to get something done. Meaning, like, and And it's more like, how do I get them recentered so they can get to where they need to be? And listen, we all make the mistake. I mean, we can tell ourselves not to do it over and over again. We're still going to make the mistake.
We're just going to do it. That's just what happens.
The more I can get yourself to do that, to like say, okay, how do I get them to recenter and focus on what we need them to focus on? Because they're all over the place. Instead of, trying to will them to focus on it, we have to like explain. And that is a big change of the society of kids now, that you probably in the old days could, through some level of will and motivation, do it. But now
just sheer,
now you got to reset
it. You better do it. Like almost invoking like that old school military type of coaching vibe, where you're literally going to do it my way, or this isn't going to end well. Like try to do that now, dude. Like you ain't going to have a job very long. You know what I'm saying? So I think those types of things to kind of, I don't want to say almost trick kids into it, but you're kind of massaging it and making it work a certain type of way so that they kind of, how can I get them to see it this way? Well, maybe I have to do this, or maybe I have to do that. And to me, the more options I have, dude, like multiple choice tests were way better than fill in the blank. So, I need a word bank, dude. And if I can, talk to every coach in America about, what do you do? Okay, cool. Like then we can rock. And, like you said, if you could be a head coach and be really good at something, but if you're not good, or, that's when you go and find an assistant that might be really good at that. And then you kind of fill in those gaps.
You got to fill in the blanks.
100%.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, that was great, Pi. Very, very interesting. I'm so glad I didn't have to ask that many questions. That was great.
Dude, I knew it, like just from like reaching out to him last week, and then obviously I dropped it. He said he was going to the Wing T clinic. I said, oh, make sure you go see, Jerry Gallagher is a Jersey, whatever. Oh, he's the guy. So I wasn't expecting to go see him and talk to him, but obviously, Coach Gallagher, who's been on before, he's so, I guess, he kind of signed off on us. So we'll take that. Thanks, Coach Gallagher. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And on cue, I freeze. Here we
go. Get him, buddy.